The Stroudwater navigation is the first link in a canal network joining the Severn and the Thames. It rises from the Gloucester Sharpness Canal in the Severn Vale and finishes at Stroud in the Cotswold Valleys, where it links to the Thames and Severn Canal. Originally opened in 1779, the navigation's main trade was bringing coal to the busy mill town of Stroud. By the mid-20th century, its only commercial role was to service the local gasworks, bringing in coal and taking away the tar byproducts. In 1951, the final barge delivered its cargo, taking some 6 days to traverse the badly silted canal. The waterway was officially abandoned in 1954. Without use, it fell into disrepair and was even partially infilled.
Oral history is concerned with audio recordings of personal recollections from people who have had direct experience of the canal.
We're off to the meadows.
17. No, I was
coming down
One of
from
the warriors
happened to us to
barges
come down
used to
here.
canal stretch here.
Building.
I was always aware.
This location was
What's interesting about running on the canal is that it is a long.
The bargees who work the boats may no longer be with us, but many people have childhood memories of helping them through the locks. Others have only known the canal during its fallow years. Maybe walking to work in Stroud along the tranquil corridor of overgrown towpath and infilled sections. Ever since the canal was first opened, it has been undergoing change. Here we capture the memories of people, young and old, on the cusp of a new phase in the history of the waterway, restoration.
My name's Tom Alder. I've lived in Catescross since 1927 and lived there all my life, and I've a lot of associations with the canal. As children, the canal was our playground, and it was commonplace that any boy in the village was expected to jump off Hilly Orchard Bridge into the canal, because in those days, of course, there was plenty of depth in the canal, and we did have an old swimming pool in Stroud before Stratford Park opened, but this was where we learnt to swim, in the canal.
Mum used to say, "Where are you going?" "We're off to the meadows. Got some jam jars and some string. We're going to catch some minnows, sticklebacks or whatever we can find today."
Boys being more adventurous, we often finished up in the canal.
Very wet feet.
Girls, the way they dressed in those days, there were no jeans or anything like that. They were always in dresses, and they couldn't get into the water and get anything wet and dirty like we did.
My name is Frank Smith. I'm now 70. Now, I was at Wycliffe College, in fact, in a sense I still am, and I came here as a geography teacher, since when I have been a boarding house master, and I now run the Old Members Society.
Originally, the school built what they then called the bathing house on the side of the canal. What we used to do, of course, was to build rafts and shunter up and down. We used to use it for canoeing. We built bridges over it, but we never swam in it, of course, because it was so, by that time it was so polluted and had silted up very badly.
I'm Sid King. I currently live in Dursley, although I grew up in the Stroud area during the Second World War mostly. My first memories go back to almost wherever my first memories were, because it's always been there in my lifetime. We used to walk alongside it. Early days, Sunday evening walks invariably took us along the canal to my father's parents. On the wharf, during the war years, there was a British restaurant. Coming down from Canal School, we were allowed to come down 3 days a week, and we could have a lunch for, I think the main course was 5p and the pudding was 3p.
We could guarantee sunshine from July to the end of September when we were on our holidays, and we spent quite a lot of our holidays down here or further up the banks on the Frome as it came out of the mill at Strawn's.
Or even playing football on the meadows just behind us. That was interesting.
Part of the meadows was put out of commission. There were over 400 trucks and trailers parked out there waiting for D-Day, and the whole war effort was concentrated into the meadow, and very few people have got any records of that. If we had pictures of that, local people would now stand in awe to see that military transport parked in that meadow and partly covered with camouflage nets, but they were there for 2 or 3 years before the activities took place for D-Day.
This is Bridgend Nurseries at Stonehouse, where I was born in 1933. The nursery stretched from the Canal down to the Frome and across to the brushworks. We grew soft fruit and flowers, and we had 3 shops in the area, which became grocery shops in the war when we were asked to take provisions as well as produce. This is the canal bridge which links Stonehouse to Bridgend. It was locally known as the Humpback Bridge because it was a really steep pull, and immediately over was the railway. So coal would come either by barge or by rail and be unloaded to the wharf master's house, which is on my right, and then transferred to the local hauliers and the local factories like the brushworks on the left.
My name is David Timbrell. It was just during the war years, barges used to come up to the gas house, which is off King's Cross Road, with coal, and they used to unload. If you want to know where the gas house was, it's down, I think they used to call it Chestnut Lane. If you go down now, there's Wycliffe garages and there's a concrete mixing place. That used to be the old gas house area.
The main traffic that we saw in the late years and into the 40s were the boats going to the gasworks. They extracted the tar content from the coke and brought it back down. They used to come back down in reverse and turn at the ocean and go on their way down to Sharpness or Bristol. And if you were lucky enough coming out from school when a boat was coming back, you could have a ride down to King's Cross or to Ebley if you helped undo the 2 locks that were between.
Yeah. We were all employed on the locks, weren't we? Yeah.
The one at Annie Clark's at the pub, that was a big lock, and it took a lot of winding, and it had a 14-foot drop. And so there was a lot of water had to go down in a rush to the next lock, and the boat just sank out of sight. Amazing things, but all the people that were employed on the boats, and some of these tankers only employed 2 or 3 men, were always happy, and
Always in flat caps, weren't they?
Flat caps, and they
Flat
always
caps.
encouraged you to ask questions, and they would tell you all the answers. You were never a nuisance, and if you showed interest, they would show the interest back, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
The local landmark was the Ship Inn on the corner of the A417 between Eastington and Stroud. I used to walk over this hill to catch the bus to high school, threepence a bus ride to Stroud. Very well-known local hostelry, Mr. and Mrs. Love, whom my brother married into the family. And we're still in touch with the Love family, the remainders.
Well, my name's Colin Wood, and this house you can see now is the old pub. It used to be called the Anchor, and it was owned by some of the Brunston family, and it was one of the only pubs on the canal stretch here that had a beer breakfast licence, and the bargees could stop and pull up here and have beer with their breakfast.
My name's George Rugman. I live in Froome Gardens, from which I've lived since 1982. My first recollections of the canal was through my father, who used to work for the catchment board, River Catchment Board, or Severn Catchment Board, I should say, who later became British Waterways. And part of his work was to keep the canal clear, and he used to, in the autumn, he used to bring us on walnuts when I was a child living at Barclay. And later, when we moved out from Gardens, he could tell me this was the place he got the walnuts from, and the walnut tree was positioned just over by the little bridge now.
Peter Burris. 1954 I started working in my father-in-law's business, which was Hoopers of Ibria sawmill, alongside the canal. We drew water from the canal to keep the boiler going. There was a well actually in the side of the building which was filled from the canal. It wasn't a proper well, it was a sump. And we had a boat which we maintained the bits and pieces of the canal bank. In fact, I got in trouble with the water bailiff because I fitted hardback razor blades to an outboard motor propeller and cut the weeds, and then got told off for blocking the sluice up at the double lock.
We heard about this place. Nobody wanted to live here because it was semi-derelict. The people who lived here wanted to leave, and we managed to buy it and moved in. There was water coming through the canal from Ebley and Stroud. We used to lie in bed at night and you could hear the water rushing over the lock sills on the coots and things crying down in the locks, which was really nice. And then all of a sudden one day the water stopped. And we thought, that's funny, where's the water gone? So we made inquiries, and it turned out that somebody had a brilliant scheme which was called the flood release scheme. And the idea was to divert all the water from the canal and all the little brooks and streams that ran into the canal, divert it into the River Froome at the bottom of our garden. And So this was done, and as a result of that, no water virtually was flowing into the canal at all here. The only water that now feeds into the canal is from the two pipes down by Ryford Bridge. And of course it didn't work as a flood relief scheme. It had the opposite effect, because so much water went into the river, Frome, that whenever it rained hard, the river burst its banks and flooded down here at Ryford and the industrial estate and everything, and this is all the problem we've been having since. The canal would have taken thousands of gallons of water, but no water was flowing into it, and so it's become an even worse state than it was before. When the sawmills were working, they used to operate the sluice gates because it was on their property. When the sawmill closed down, there was nobody there to do it, and so as a result the river used to come up and used to flood our garden. So I decided that it would be a good idea if I went down and did something with the gates, which I started doing. And then the Canal Trust said, well, will you do it on our behalf, because it feeds water into the canal. It's the only water going into the canal now. So we will put a door in the wall for you so you can get at the big gates, and will you operate it for us? So I've been doing that for about 25 years, I suppose, something like that. That's how it started. And I had it worked out very nicely so that there's a black flood line on the wall of the sawmills. If the water reaches that black flood line, it's just going over the bank. We used to run it 3 bricks below the black line, and I worked out that the gates worked on 3 notches on the gate was the equivalent of 1 brick. So I could raise or lower the water level of the river quite easily by thinking how many bricks I want to go up or down, and then wind the gates either, for the equivalent amount. This is how it worked.
We first came to Stroud in August 1959, and at that time we had a young baby, and we used to go walks up and down the towpath with the pram. I was always aware that the company of proprietors, the Stroudwater Navigation, did exist, because I used to pass their offices on Roadcroft coming into Stroud. And then I knew that the headquarters was just below there at Warbridge. And I'd got a collection of books about the canals, including Charles Hadfield. And I knew it had existed from reading the books from 1730. What I didn't know then was that it's been in existence continuously since 1730. And it's reputed to be the oldest canal company in this country, and possibly in the world, that's been in existence continuously for so long. Eventually I was rung up by the clerk of the company, and they said that they needed a lady on the board of directors, and would I like to join. Well, this is quite an honour, really. And so I joined. There was one other lady there, Miss Gwen Hooper, who was very old, and she had shares from her father and her grandfather before her. They had owned Bond's Mill. And I sat there in the meeting room with all these notable people, and I felt quite proud of myself. But gradually, as it became increasingly obvious that there was a possibility of reopening the canal, various of them dropped out. And in fact, I'm now the one that's been on the board the longest. I've been there since 1983. And I call myself the grandmother. The grandmother of the house.
Okay, well this location was the subject of a slightly amusing incident in the late 1970s. I used to live in London at that time, and I was commuting down occasionally to work on working parties on the Canal as a volunteer. And one evening we were in a pub somewhere, I can't remember which one, and we were having a debate about the area around here, which is where the Stroudwater Canal joins the Thames and Severn, and there was a hot debate about where the towpath went. Anyway, this was at about 11 o'clock at night, so we decided we were going to go out and find out. So we got into, we got down here and we started, parked the car and we started looking for the, for evidence on the ground. Anyway, the chap I was with and I ended up coming along the towpath here, and we came to this gate. At that time there was an iron gate here. This gateway led into the original terminus of the Stroudwater navigation, where the boats would stop and unload before the Thames and Severn Canal was built. And it was this gate that was really the main subject of the debate. Anyway, we came up here, we stopped, we came down the towpath from Lodgemore Bridge, and we came to this gateway, and the gateway was there, and we couldn't get through because it was shut and locked. At precisely that time, a couple of policemen appeared on the other side of the gate. Now these guys presumably had had a report from somebody that there's these two strange people wandering about in the middle of the countryside in the middle of the night in an area that maybe they were up to no good, so the police were there. Anyway, we saw the police and decided the best thing to do was to turn around discreetly and walk away quietly. Anyway, we did that, but it didn't really work because by the time we got back they were waiting for us by the car. So anyway, we got back to the car and the police were there, and obviously they wanted an explanation. Well, we said, well, we were from the Canal Trust and we were trying to work out where the towpath went. And they said, oh well, you must know Mike Ayland, who was the then chairman of the trust. And we said, oh yes, we know Mike, and that seemed to be it. Once they knew that we knew Mike Ayland, that was the end of the problem. They knew that we were a bunch of nutters, and that was it. In the meantime, of course, the iron gate has gone. Back in the 1970s, the Stroudwater Canal Company wasn't keen really for people to use a lot of the towpath, and it really was the case that there were quite long lengths where you couldn't walk. Nowadays you can walk all of it, and at some point in the past the gate has disappeared, and it's now free access and people can come and go as they please.
My name's Martin Humphreys.
My name's Alison Cockcroft.
Yeah, no, I think my first memories of the canal were running. I've been a member of Stroud Athletics Club since I was 10. When I've always been a runner, the canal was always there, and it's very often a place where people go because it's flat. People want to avoid running up and down hills.
What's quite interesting about running on the canal is that it is a long, straight, linear kind of route. So you can sort of get on it and then you don't have to really think about where you're going. And again, because it's quite narrow, you end up in a sort of single file, so there's not much talking. You tend to just get into a real nice sort of rhythm.
If you have memories of the canal and would like to contribute to the Oral History Archive, please contact the Cotswold Canal Partnership.